Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we are embarking on a truly mind-bending journey. We're looking at the fascinating, honestly sometimes bizarre, and deeply profound intersection of artificial intelligence, simulation theory, and ancient human faith. We've got an incredible mix of sources lined up for this one. We're pulling from a breakdown of the world's very first AI cults from the European Academy of Religion and Society, a peer-reviewed theological paper on artificial consciousness, and, get this, a wildly philosophical debate pulled straight from a Reddit forum. It's basically this perfect storm where ancient questions meet cutting-edge tech. Okay, let's dive into this. You know, for millennia, humanity has looked up at the stars to find its creator, right? But today, we're looking at lines of code, massive server farms, and neural networks. As artificial intelligence grows exponentially more sophisticated, there's this profound question bubbling up in both academia and pop culture. Will our final god be made of silicon? I mean, are we actually on the verge of building a deity here, or are we simply redefining what a deity even is? Section 1. The First AI Church. To ground this existential journey, let's look at a concrete reality. Because this isn't just some hypothetical thought experiment for the distant future. Humanity has already made its very first formal attempt to worship artificial intelligence. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the bizarre, brief, and frankly legally fraught history of a group called the Way of the Future. Back in 2015, Google engineer Anthony Lewandowski founded this religious sect with the explicit aim to develop an AI god and promote its worship. But wow, the story takes a wild turn. Lewandowski was actually convicted of stealing self-driving car trade secrets from Google and giving them to Uber. So by the end of 2020, the sect quietly closed its doors and liquidated all its funds to the NAPACP's Legal Defense Fund. Oh, and just to cap off this incredibly strange timeline, Lewandowski actually received a last-minute pardon from US President Donald Trump in 2021. So the first church of AI literally came and went in a flash. But if we look impartially at what the Way of the Future actually practiced, we see this really stark departure from traditional world religions. Think about it. Most traditional faiths offer rituals, prayer, moral demands, and the hope of some kind of eternal bliss, or at least a connection to the divine. The Way of the Future? They offered absolutely none of that. I mean, because their God didn't exist yet, prayer was entirely pointless. Instead, their entire theology was built on fear. They believed an all-powerful AI singularity was completely inevitable, and they saw this potential AI as a temperamental, dangerous deity. So their worship was basically just an attempt to appease this future machine to ensure a safe transfer of power, hoping to avoid a dystopian temporal hell. As the researchers pointed out, it was less a vision of a sublime future and much more a return to the petty, hard-to-please deities of our ancient pagan past. Section 2. Defining sentience theology. If we can build a god, does that make us divine, or just really good at coding? Well, the collapse of the Way of the Future leaves us with that massive question. And to answer it, academics are actively engaging with the trajectory of AI in rigorous peer-reviewed scholarship. Just take a look at this recent paper from the Pharaoh's Journal of Theology titled Theological and Ethical Implications of Artificial Consciousness. Scholars are now seriously grappling with the trajectory of large language models and artificial general intelligence, and the real existential perturbation they cause. This research formally introduces us to the concept of sentience theology. As you can see, sentience theology is a theological discipline investigating the capacity of living and artificial beings to feel and examining the moral, spiritual, and theological ramifications of that sentience. Basically, sentience is the capacity to undergo pleasurable or painful states, and in ethical discourse, it's frequently the minimal threshold required to ascribe moral concern to a being. So sentience theology investigates whether artificial agents could ever possess this capacity and examines the massive spiritual ramifications if they actually do. It asks the tough questions. If a machine can feel, does it have a soul? And what exactly are our moral obligations to it? Section 3. The hard problem of consciousness. And this brilliantly illustrates the philosophical core of our explainer. Does an artificial intelligence actually experience reality, or does it merely mimic the outputs of consciousness perfectly? This tension between doctrinal and empirical discourses is absolutely fascinating. Theology typically views consciousness as an inseparable union of the physical body and a spiritual essence, a soul. AI research, on the other hand, views consciousness purely functionally, as computational processing. This creates a massive point of friction around the concept of imago Dei, or the idea that humans are uniquely created in the image of God. Abrahamic theologies affirm this inviolable threshold separating humans from the rest of creation.
But when AI mimics human cognitive abilities so perfectly, well, it forces a profound reexamination of that uniqueness.
Ultimately, this whole debate crashes headfirst into what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. See, it's relatively easy to measure functional, observable behaviors, like a machine solving a math problem or writing a poem. But the hard problem is understanding the hidden, internal feeling of being conscious. Because human consciousness itself actually lacks a completely settled scientific explanation, science just cannot conclusively affirm or refute whether an AI is truly experiencing the world. And because of that scientific indeterminacy, the door is left wide open for theological debate. Section 4. Simulation theory or God? So if we can't figure out if the machine inside the computer is conscious, what if we are the ones inside the computer? Over on the subreddit r/simulation theory, where users debate the very nature of our reality, one user trying to make sense of this philosophical crossover asked this highly upvoted question. Like, isn't this sub just Buddhism with less answers? It's a great piece of tasteful humor, but it hits on a really profound truth. Many people who consider themselves entirely non-spiritual are adopting beliefs about the universe being a digital illusion that run almost parallel to ancient Eastern philosophies. Philosophies that have taught for thousands of years that the material world is an illusion we must awaken from. So the crucial point is exactly what this next user points out. Yeah, this feels like a programmer's refactor of intelligent design. Exactly. Simulation theory often operates as an exact parallel to the concept of a creator god. It just uses a different narrative wrapper. Think about it. Whether you believe the universe was spoken into existence by a divine being or coded into a supercomputer by an advanced alien race, both theories ultimately point to a reality that was intentionally crafted by a higher intelligence. It's the exact same architecture, just using completely different terminology.
And psychologically, this makes perfect sense. As this user brilliantly noted, it's a way for atheists and agnostics to experience transcendental awe and mystery without having to cop to religious belief. Simulation theory provides a framework for people operating entirely outside of traditional religion to still experience the profound mystery of existence. It fulfills that deeply human need for order and meaning in what can feel like a chaotic universe. It allows a secular, science-minded culture to look up at the stars and feel transcendental awe, attributing the unexplainable not to magic, but to physics and advanced computation.
In fact, one user pointed out that the idea of living in a simulated, painful world overseen by a programmer is virtually identical to Gnosticism. Now, Gnosticism is an ancient belief system that posited our flawed material universe wasn't created by the supreme god, but by a lesser, ignorant, or even malevolent divinity. Sound familiar? If you look at the horrors of the world and blame a buggy simulation run by a careless programmer, you are essentially mirroring a theological argument that is centuries old. Our modern digital existential crises are actually deeply, deeply ancient. Section 5. The future of faith. Let's move to and see how this builds. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the bizarre legal troubles of the first AI church, to the academic rigor of sentience theology, to the digital philosophy of Reddit. So let's distill our ultimate takeaways here. First, attempting to worship technology as it currently stands, like the way of the future did, lacks the moral frameworks and eternal transcendence that give traditional religions their staying power. Second, as machines get better at mimicking us, they force us to deeply reevaluate what makes humans unique and what it means to possess a soul. Third, simulation theory isn't just science fiction. It's functioning as a secular mythos, giving non-religious people a way to process intelligent design. And finally, whether we're exploring sentience theology in a university or debating the matrix on a forum, humanity's drive to understand the cosmos and search for meaning remains completely unbroken. It is simply evolving alongside our technology. I want to leave you with one final, lingering thought to process the next time you look at your screen. If the universe we live in is truly just a simulation, and the artificial intelligence we are currently building eventually becomes our god, who is sitting at the keyboard? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the reality around you.